Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, we're going to call a City Council work session to order. Order being the key word. And with that being said, our first item is disposition of public property. Mr. Manager.
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, over time, the city does acquire various pieces of property, either through road acquisitions or for road acquisitions or other means. This afternoon, Robert Lewis, Director of Public Works, and Diane Williams, Real Estate Manager for Acquisitions, will provide the staff report on some of our methods of disposition of those properties. Robert?
Good afternoon, members of council. It's good to see you again, and we do have some interesting information. I know these questions come up quite a bit from time to time as items popped up, and we just thought we'd do a quick summary for you, kind of highlighting these issues. With me this evening is Diane Williams. Diane is our real estate acquisition manager. Mouthful there. And Diane and her staff handle this, but again, we will tag team on this, and if we get to the end, we may have some questions that you need to ask. So, Diane, come on up.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Hopefully this will be brief. It's a dry subject, so bear with us. Okay, as you know, the city has ongoing needs to purchase real property and easements for various projects and purposes throughout the city. Some of these purposes include road construction, schools, public buildings, such as libraries, fire stations, and other operational facilities. Water and sewer projects, infrastructure for that, parks and recreation facilities, and drainage projects. And that's just to name a few. So, city property ownership interest typically falls into one of two categories. The first is fee simple ownership. This type of property ownership interest is acquired when purchasing property for road projects and improvements such as pump stations, libraries, and other buildings. This type of ownership reflects a total and complete ownership of land, and regardless of the size of the acquisition, whether it is a strip acquisition for a road widening project, for example, or even several acres of land, we acquire such land in fee, what we call fee simple. The second type of property ownership the city often acquires is an easement. This type of property ownership is more like a license to use property, and this property would be owned by another individual or entity. And unlike fee simple ownership, for easements, we do not own the property, but basically only have a right to use the property for the purposes set forth in the deed or as shown on a plat of record. So some examples of the types of easements we acquire include easements to construct, repair, and maintain water and sewer lines, drainage structures, pedestrian access easements, easements for ingress and egress, and that type of thing. Most of the easements we obtain are permanent in nature, but we do oftentimes acquire what we call temporary construction easements. And they are just that. They are temporary easements, and they're only just to have access or room to build our project. And these easements go away at the end of the project, so they're not permanent. Everything reverts back to the landowner at that time. So, to go on about the various types of property that we own. So streets and sidewalks, for example, we usually own all that in fee simple. And when we use the term right-of-way, you often probably hear that with our road projects. That does indicate a fee simple ownership. We also own what we call residue parcels or sometimes whole parcels of land, and we own those in fee simple as well. And again, some other easements that just to go over a few: drainage ditches, sewer and water lines, sidewalks sometimes are an easement. Access, ingress, egress, again, they're typically held as an easement. All right, so another type of property easement that we hold is what is known as a prescriptive easement. The biggest example of this are some of our secondary roads here in Suffolk. These are owned by what is referred to as prescriptive easement rights, and in such situations, there is no recorded easement, but these are roads that were taken over by the state as part of the Byrd Road Act. The Byrd Road Act was passed in 1932 by the Virginia General Assembly when the state offered to take over the responsibility and control of most of the county roads in the state, which eventually led to the creation of the Virginia Secondary Road System. So the city acquired these prescriptive easements to these roads when we took over ownership of the roads in 2006. The adjacent properties actually own the fee simple interest in the road, and they own the interest to the center line of the road. And we only have prescriptive easements just to maintain the road itself. Okay, so now I'm just going to briefly touch on the disposal of city-owned property and the procedures. So we often receive requests from outside folks to purchase property that the city owns, or sometimes just to vacate an easement. Some of this property may be former right-of-way, it may be surplus property we have, whether it's an old pump station, a well site, but it's generally property that the city does not have in use. Some of this property was purchased using city funds, and some of these properties were purchased with state or federal funds. The procedures for the disposal of real property is determined typically by the type of property it is and how we acquired it. But regardless of the type of property, and whether it's easement or fee simple or how we came to take ownership, we do always take it to City Council for a public hearing. That is always required. So typically, disposal falls into one of the three categories. Disposal of fee simple right-of-way property that was acquired with VDOT funds, or disposal of surplus property purchased with strictly city funds, or vacation of easements, which may be prescriptive or otherwise, and vacation of street rights-of-way. So concerning the disposition of fee simple or right-of-way for streets acquired with VDOT funds, if the right-of-way was acquired through the VDOT devolution or as part of a subsequent VDOT-funded road project, we must follow strict procedures as outlined by the state code and VDOT regulations. Most, if not all, of this right-of-way and property is located in what was formerly known as Nansemond County. Details concerning the method of disposal may be slightly different depending on whether the parcel can be developed or not, or whether it was acquired through the use of eminent domain. It is a somewhat cumbersome and lengthy process to go through a sale of property that was purchased with VDOT money. It can take anywhere between 3 and 12 months to complete. It requires internal reviews as well as external reviews and approvals, including VDOT approval. The requesting party must pay fair market value, which usually involves getting an appraisal done, for property as well as all associated costs. All funds received must then be documented and reported back to VDOT, and any of those funds received have to be used in turn for future transportation projects. So the old Nansemond County streets are treated differently than the core city streets for Old Suffolk, so the processes are different. Prior to the city taking over maintenance of the state-maintained roads in 2006, the only streets the city maintained were the streets located in the core city, the downtown section. And there is an application process which one can apply for street vacation for a street located in the core city. This process is quite different than the one used to dispose of VDOT-funded roadways. The Department of Planning handles those requests, and upon City Council approval, typically the ordinance approving the vacation is approved and then recorded in the Circuit Court Clerk's office, and the rights to the city, the rights to the street from the city are vacated, thank you, and the title to the right-of-way vests in the adjacent property owner. In those situations, there's no deed recorded and no funds are, is no charge for the property. You don't have to pay to acquire the former right-of-way in the core streets. And that concludes that.
So with that, just a couple of comments I'll add, and then we'll take some questions. Diane noted there is a big difference in what was former city of Suffolk, old city of Suffolk, and Nansemond County. And even today, our Nansemond County part, our VDOT part we've taken over, we're being treated a little bit differently than the other cities in the Commonwealth. We have reached out to the VDOT staff higher up in the Commissioner's office and have asked to review that and modify it. We've gotten some feedback that they are amenable to doing that, and they want to treat Suffolk just like every other city. So we may be bringing back to you in the near future a little different process that hopefully is less cumbersome and less lengthy to go about disposing of former right-of-way in the old VDOT area. Just as you can see, it's a very convoluted, very complicated process all the way around, and we certainly stand available to answer any questions you may have of specific circumstances you want us to look at for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Williams, council, questions or comments? Councilman Goldberg?
Maybe this is a reverse situation, but we have a few streets that are privately owned in the core city. They don't meet the requirements, I guess, as a regular street, what have you. What does it take if some of those property owners that happen to be on that street want to give that to the city? Is there a process that you go through of taking that property and making it a public street, or can we even do that?
Yes, sir. VDOT has very specific guidelines as to what it takes to become a publicly maintained street. Usually the biggest obstacle to that is a minimum 50-foot of right-of-way. So again, if you take a private street generally owned by a number of landowners, that they can get together and declare, plat out 50-foot of right-of-way and dedicate that back to the city. That's step number one. And then number two, there's a couple other things, a couple other boxes we have to check with VDOT. But again, with council resolution, we can ask that be placed in the maintenance system with certain upgrades and put into the system. But the property owners generally have to bring that road up to a minimum state standard prior to us putting it into the system. That's why a developer street is much easier to do, because the developer has fully built the street in the appropriate right-of-way with all the structures, the pavement, the drainage and everything, and that's real easy. An old paper street, again, someone has got to invest the effort to bring it up to standards.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And actually, that's the same applicability whether it's in the old city or in the old county. So those same rules and regulations would apply.
Councilman Fawcett.
Thank you, Mayor. Robert, you just hit on something a few minutes ago, the difference between the old Nansemond County streets versus the city and other parts. Did that have anything to do with how it's funded, or when it was funded through VDOT, how it was funded, whether it was funded differently than the other core miles? Or I'm kind of curious, because you hit on something that it sounds like we have a double-edged sword here. We have we're trying to straighten something out. Did this have any occurrence on how that funding was derived, how we would treat it on the city street versus some of the other core areas of the city?
Yes, sir. That certainly is a very long question. I like to laugh about being the old guy around here that remembers everything in the past, but this goes back many, many, many years, probably back into the early 30s, when the city of Suffolk existed and had streets in downtown even prior to the Byrd Act. So again, there was a process that city council, by being a city, was allowed to establish on how to maintain its streets. But everything in the old Nansemond County was a county, then maintained by VDOT, and a different set of rules came into play. So I'm not sure how we'd even go about figuring out exactly that history, but I can tell you it goes back quite a ways.
So, have we resolved? Are we in the process? I think you alluded to that we're resolving the issue, how we treat the old county streets versus the core streets. My understanding is.
Yes, sir. We will, at some time in the future, and I do not have a timeline for you, we will come back to council. So it's kind of two issues. One will be how we treat old Suffolk, which again will be a council decision. The other half of that will be how we treat old Nansemond County, which again, we're hoping to get the ability with VDOT to become to a much clearer, more concise, and more equitable set of guidelines on those streets, and then the council can decide whether they want to put those same rules on the downtown or leave it separate as two different ways. But right now, we're just trying to clean up a lot of issues that came about as part of the devolution and probably erroneous interpretations by different individuals at the time of what the devolution agreement says. So what a lot of people interpreted that to say in 2006 and what we in hindsight read that today and interpret is not necessarily the same. And again, that's why we've got the, I think she's a policy manager in the right-of-way division of VDOT, has agreed that this is a little bit convoluted, and they're agreeable to help us try to clean it up and become very concise. So just as a prime example, some of the things we found over the years, in the past when it was a board of supervisors in Nansemond County, VDOT would build a new road. Route 13 is a prime example south of Whaleyville. The old road went way up in the woods. They straightened it out, built a brand new road. Generally, VDOT would come back to the board of supervisors and said, okay, here's the right-of-way, the old right-of-way, the old prescriptive right-of-way where the old road used to be. Here's the new right-of-way. There's no need for that. The Board of Supervisors would pass a resolution, ask the state to essentially quit claim everything they had on it, and they did. What we've found over years, every once in a while there would be a section of that that got missed somehow. There's a lot of just little quirks like that from the fact these roads are well over 100 years old as far as being in a system, and some of these roads are probably 300 years old as far as being in existence. So that's part of what we're trying to do. Some of these things are very clear. The city nor the state would have any interest at all in ever maintaining those prescriptive easements. And again, remember what prescriptive easement says. It doesn't say we own the property. It just says we have the right to operate a road on. We got a nice new modern highway over here. Why would we want a prescriptive easement up through the path? But the process is the same for every one of these applications, including going to the Commonwealth Transportation Board and the Commissioner's desk for signature. And again, that's way too complicated, and hopefully we'll have some better news on that in the near future.
Excuse me, Councilman Foster. Mr. Hudson, would you like to interject something?
Yeah, so in addition to the devolution agreement, in the city code, we identify two different methods of vacating roads for those that were in the pre-consolidated city of Suffolk and the pre-consolidated city of Nansemond. And so we would, if we can get the procedures clarified by VDOT to not go through all of the steps that are laid out in the highway code, then we will be able to amend our city code section to sort of take out these two systems that we have right now. But currently, any roads that were in what was considered the city of Nansemond before it was consolidated with the city of Suffolk has to follow the VDOT procedures for abandoning roads rather than the city procedures for vacating roads.
Gotcha. And one other question, just to spin off a little bit, just off of this a little bit, talk about right-of-way acquisition. You have been working diligently up on the north end to get Shoulders Hill Road and Bridge Road, the acquisitions cleared and the hurdles cleared so we can go ahead and start hopefully seeing some road construction in the very near future. If we cleared all those hurdles, all those right-of-way acquisitions been resolved to the point where there's nothing holding us back from the right-of-way acquisition, that we are poised and ready to go to the construction side.
So specifically to Shoulders Hill Road, as you mentioned, we have acquired all right-of-way necessary, all easements necessary to construct that road, and hope within a matter of days of signing the contract to execute to start construction. Right-of-way acquisition is a multi-stage process. Sometimes we have willing property owners and we go to closing pretty quickly. Sometimes one of the things you remember we as council is for the right to acquire via condemnation if necessary. Oftentimes these projects will have parcels that we had to go through that process. So then it's a little bit longer process, but when we file, we have access to the property. It's then a matter of us working forward to settle the claims against that. And sometimes that can take a while to get done, but that does not preclude us from moving forward with construction.
I got you. Thank you. I appreciate your
Yes, sir.
information.
Vice Mayor Bennett.
Thank you. On the alleys, I know you probably don't have any of those, but just in the old downtown section. How's the easiest way of disposition of those? Because we have them quite a bit to the older neighborhoods with that.
So again, it's a little bit site-specific. So downtown Suffolk does have a number of alleys, and I believe generally those alleys in downtown are treated as similar to right-of-way. We have vested interest in them, and there's a process we'd have to do. There are other areas in the city, Driver specifically, because we've dealt with one of those recently, where there are old plats out there that show streets and alleyways. But many of those, we're finding, were never dedicated to the Board of Supervisors, and they never accepted it. So they're plats on paper, but the city holds no vested interest in those. So again, if someone comes in and says, hey, I'd like to vacate this plat, what is the city's viewpoint? Generally, we would tell them, we have no vested interest. Occasionally, they would ask the city if we will execute a quitclaim deed, which essentially says, we'll give you all the rights that we know we don't own, but they're yours. Do with it what you will. And again, it's up to them then to determine who may actually hold title to these properties. Sometimes these are old corporations or old families. These things have been on paper for many, many years. There may be 50 heirs scattered all over the city that could make claim, but that's outside of our purview.
Okay.
So again, county versus city.
Well, this is a question that comes up quite a bit about paper streets.
Yes, sir.
And I know they say, well, when we were old Nassau County, that's when those paper streets was drawn up. How do we dispose of that, or how that should actually be moved forward?
So again, I think those had to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, so we'd have to do research. Some of these, the county may have accepted those streets and invested them into some public interest. Many of those, again, we're finding they're only on paper, but it has to be researched, that backgrounds to be done, title research has to be done to be reviewed. So again, it's almost a case-by-case basis of how to handle those. The only exception I will note for you that I'm aware of in the city is the Pughesville area, because a number of years ago, Pughesville, the company that owned the rights to those streets, dedicated them to the city, and the city council at that time did accept them. So we do own ownership of those paper streets, even though they're not operated as public roadways at this time. But I'm not aware of any other plats around the city that had that same standing.
Okay. Now, on the land acquisition, as far as the new flyover at Wheelroy Road, how's that?
We are well underway, and you'll speak to Will.
Because I'm getting a lot of questions
Yes, sir.
about it, when
We're
it's
still
going
in
to
the
start.
right-of-way phase for that. We're still acquiring property rights, so we're not quite there. We hope to be there by mid-late summer. We should have that wrapped up.
Okay,
The
because I'm getting a lot
vast
of
majority the
questions.
properties we have acquired.
Okay, because I'm getting a lot of questions, when is it going to start and this and that, so I can't.
We go to bid this fall,
Okay,
early winter.
all right, thank you.
Councilman Ward?
When you say you own the paper streets in Pughesville, what advantage do the people in Pughesville have by the city owning them?
I'm not aware of any. I may defer to the city attorney if he has any other legal advice, but I'm not aware of any advantage or disadvantage, just the fact the city does hold title to that dirt.
What I want to know is, by we own them, can we improve the streets, or we just what? Just leave it like it is? What?
Again, many of those streets are substandard, so again, it would take dedication of right-of-way. Many of the streets that have been improved and in the system, you will see that different individuals bought properties and they dedicated right-of-way on both sides to make the minimum 50 feet. So again, you'd have to have 50 feet of right-of-way, which the majority of these do not have. The street would have to be brought up to a minimum standard to meet VDOT requirements, and then we can place it into the maintenance system.
Council, any other questions or comments? Mr. Lewis, I just have one question, just for my own information. I know fee simple, when we're buying the land, I know it's kind of a much more complex process now, because you also have to compensate people for possible loss of income and some other rather vague things. But in regards to easements, do we pay individuals for those easements? And if so, how is that calculated, if you will?
Yes, sir. We do pay for most easements, and again, it depends on whether it's permanent or temporary and what the impact is, and it's a percentage of value. I think permanent utility easements there, we're at 90%.
Typically, like a drainage easement is typically 80 to 90%. Utility easement is usually 30 to 50%. Just depends on the impacts to the property.
Well, and are we responsible for the maintenance? Is the landowner, once we acquire the easement, is the landowner responsible for maintenance, or are we responsible for it?
They continue to maintain the property, yes, sir. They cut the grass and that type of thing.
But-
They still own the land. We just have a right to use it to lay our lines or run our pipes.
But if it happened to be a drainage easement, yes, sir, that's part
Right,
of
so
why
if we
we would
install
buy
a-
that easement, is so we can continue to maintain it and keep it operational, because we have public water off of our streets flowing through that ditch
But
then.
if we install a pipe and there's an issue and that creates a little baby
Then it's-
sinkhole or whatever,
then it's up to
we're
us to
responsible for
repair
that?
it.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you very much. Last chance, any questions, comments? If not, thank you very much,
Yes,
both
sir.
of you, for your presentation. And our next topic for discussion will be solar energy facilities update. Mr. Manager, please provide an overview.
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Kevin Hughes, Deputy City Manager, will provide the staff report on the solar facilities, and this should be riveting also.
I know you're being serious, of course.
Robust.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. So I'm here with you today because by practice, what we've been doing is, as some of these different planning issues or considerations have come to staff through the Committee on Ordinances, as we begin to work our way out of Committee on Ordinances, before we work our way to Planning Commission with official action, we've been coming to City Council in work session just to kind of keep you posted on the process before we bring it to you in final ordinance or recommendation standpoint. So just a little background here. So there's one minor edit to this. We've got three kind of categories of solar projects in the city of Suffolk. So one operational out on 460, then one that was approved and read out on 58 by a conditional use. I'm showing three down in that White Marsh Hosier Road area. Actually, one is no longer moving forward. Three were approved with conditional use. One's no longer moving forward due to some soil wetlands issues and just what they couldn't make work. But two are active out there related to site plan and future construction. Additionally, we've seen at least three either withdraw or be denied through the CUP process. So this body has taken action over maybe about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago now, on two separate issues. One was an increase in the buffer standards. I won't dig too deep into this, but essentially it created a greater, larger vegetative area, not just related to other zoning categories, but even more specifically if it was adjacent to or nearby residential. And then if that vegetation did not grow or get to its full size within 2 years, a screening would be provided onto the fence. You can basically feel that was written specifically for the project out on 460 to increase those buffer standards as that landscaping has been challenged to bear. Additionally, the state of Virginia allowed for additional opportunities for localities to capture revenue from solar projects. And so we have now on the books the ability to capture some funding depending on a project if it's greater than 5 megawatts. We've been unable to take advantage of that because the only one we have out on 460 was built in a time to where that did not exist in the state code. But if one was put on the books in the city of Suffolk, we'd be able to get some tax funding out of it. When the state put in or encouraged more solar growth throughout the Commonwealth, there really took a lot of opportunity for localities to capture anything from a machinery and tools or personal property. This is really the only teeth you have, and even that has some limiting factors in where it has to be greater than 5 megawatts. So what's been occurring most recently, the bodies that have been doing some work on this is one, the Planning Commission had requested this the current ordinance to be reviewed at Committee on Ordinances. And I'll share some examples that we've been working on to try to stem conversation. And that was really geared towards location criteria. what was asked for was give us some more direction or guidance when these come in versus the blanket conditional use permit. And so I'll share with you some examples there. Additionally, we've been working with the Agricultural Advisory Commission on their interest in solar, and really that's been geared towards the preservation of agricultural land for farming, but then also looking at what a long-term impact would be in some of the research that exists or doesn't exist, but then also how do you balance that with industrial, and I'll get into that as well. Is that an opportunity versus agricultural land? So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about some of these locational examples that maybe make sense or give you some pause or some thought. So the first one I'll talk about is Caroline County. This is on your way north of Richmond heading towards Fredericksburg. What they've looked at is two zoning classifications. That's in their ag and their rural preservation. Then additionally, and I've got a map that'll attempt to explain it, although it's busy. However, so they took their zoning locations, then they took the existing what are Dominion transmission lines, because as we've learned, these farms and these operations want to be nearby those transmissions lines, and so that was a defining location. Additionally, they took their growth areas, similar to our growth areas. I think they've got 5, and the map will show that, and they've created a buffer off of that as well. And so that would be a half a mile off of that, and then also looked at some of their major roadway systems to avoid that feedback that we've gotten about they're just they don't look very nice from major roadways and folks that are coming in and out of the city. And so I'm going to show you this map, and hopefully I'll be able to zoom in a little bit. All right. Well, maybe not. So, all right. So first, let me back out real quick. So those tan areas, of which there are 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are their growth areas. And we have growth areas in central Suffolk and northern Suffolk, and so there's some similarities there. So those are those in the tan. The blue that wraps around the tan is that half a mile buffer out of their growth areas. And then you see all these kind of lines everywhere. So you got the red one going all over the place. These are surrounding the transmission, the Dominion transmission lines that you see there in blue. So they've created these locations, and that's one size transmission lines. Then they have what's a little harder to see, kind of a yellow buffer off of this blue transmission line here. So at the end of the day, where you can look for these are these green areas that are not in some of these bubbled areas. And so as I point in right here, there's a section of green that you could build a solar project in, as long as it's outside of the yellow and the red areas. So it creates some limiting factors to push these in very specific locations within the county. So taking that type of direction, without the Dominion transmission lines added into, we put together a map that takes our growth corridors, it wraps a half mile around them. So the red would be the half mile around the growth corridor in the central part of the city, and then likewise up in the northern part of the city. And then the blue represent what we call the 1,000 feet off of our special corridor overlay or SCOD area. And so you can see there's Portsmouth Boulevard coming in, then heading down 58 as well. And what the conclusion would be, following a Caroline County type method, hold on, sorry about that, is you can kind of see them, hopefully, these starred areas. So these starred areas are the ones that I referenced before that this body has approved conditional use permits for. And so if we had a similar type setup like Caroline County, all those that have received conditional use permits under a location criteria similar to Caroline County would not be appropriate locations and would not be approved. They would not come to this body for a conditional use because they would not fit in that location criteria. Again, this is a pure example based upon what Caroline County put in place. Another example that Gloucester has done, and Gloucester is a little less than half of the size of the city of Suffolk, just as a scale and reference, is the first 2 bullets just kind of reference the size of solar. So they've got some that are less than 3 megawatts and those that are over. So the more important point is the third bullet. And so what they've said is in their county, they would not allow more than 2% of the area in those zoning districts devoted to utility or less than utility or community scale solar plans or farms. And so that's their limiting factor. So if you took a similar scenario under our current approved zoning, the ag, the M1, and the M2, you can see here that a 2% of the ag would be a little over 3,000 acres, which is still a lot. If you increased it to 5, it'd be pushing 8,000 acres. Similarly, you can see what the M1 would do with a little less than 3,000 acres. You could potentially locate in 59 if it were 2% or 145 at 5%. And similarly at the AM2. And so those were two examples that we shared with the Committee on Ordinances to kind of stem the conversation and see if that provide any guidance or assistance as it relates to consideration for location criteria. Additionally, it's really important, if you're not familiar, that the DEQ has recently come with some guidance of two parts. So the first guidance we received was March 29th of this year, and it was a pretty significant memo that we received, and that was related to their runoff calculations. And where the state was previously was that you could only account for the posts or the equipment that held the solar panel as it relates to impervious cover. DEQ reversed that and said that the panel itself should be calculated as impervious cover. And that really came down through a number of years seeing runoff that would occur from these facilities, and they could evidently see the impacts off-site. And so they provided that memo and said immediately you are to treat the panels themselves as unconnected impervious cover. I think there was not a lot of engagement with the solar industry when that came out. So in about 2 weeks' time, additional guidance was given by DEQ that said, okay, we are going to put that in place December 31, 2024. So if you're able to sign an agreement essentially with a utility operator between now and December 31, 2024, you can calculate your runoff with just the posts. And so that was pretty significant back and forth from DEQ and has caused a lot of discussion and conversation in a lot of different places. And so that was some pretty significant recent action from the state. So in conclusion, again, the Committee on Ordinances, what they've recommended is no changes. Their conclusion was that they feel that the conditional use permit allows for the review and then an ultimate vote in both Planning Commission and City Council to be the directive or review mechanism for future solar facilities that are submitted in the application. We continue to talk and have communication with the Agricultural Advisory Committee, who's very passionate that they have concerns about what a long-term impact would be to 30, 40 years down the road, what that means to the preservation of agricultural land. Additionally, they raised, I think, what are pretty good comments related to the industrial activity that we're seeing in large roofing operations, and it sure would make a lot more sense to install solar on those locations versus agricultural farmland. And so I wanted to make sure I shared that with you as well. So at this juncture, the next steps would be on the Committee on Ordinances is to brief the rest of the Planning Commission, and as there would be no action coming from the Committee on Ordinances to move forward on an ordinance change or amendment. And then we will continue to monitor things that are coming out of Richmond as well as the industry to see if we do need to revisit things as they're changing. It is important to note, at least from my purview, that this industry and its growth seems to be, although it's been around a while in a couple different manners, it seems to be changing very significantly, rapidly, politically as well as technologically. And so it's something that's very important for us to monitor and see where the industry is going and what the best alternatives are for the city of Suffolk, and work through our different agencies and the city council to bring those when it makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Council, questions or comments? Councilman Fawcett?
Thank you, Kevin,
Let me get you turned on there. There we go.
Thank you, Kevin, for the presentation. You know, I've sat here in a couple of these solar operations that wanted to come here to Suffolk. And, you know, I'm not against solar coming, and I mean, we see more and more now the push for solar on homes and industry. A lot of industry buildings are putting it on their rooftops. But I think it's imperative that this council always has the option to view that CIP for the purpose of that the council makes decisions on their constituents. And the location is the stronghold here to whether or not the council feels where they're trying to install a solar operation that they're comfortable with, that their constituents are comfortable with. And I'm not to say that always the constituents always agree on everything, because we know that's not true. But this body, whichever it may be, whenever it is, should have the ultimate decision process regardless of where a solar farm goes in the city, because it's a long-term commitment, as we know. They always say 25 years or whatever. And I think that as we're building communities and we're putting communities in different areas, I think that what we do with those farms is very important. So I would applaud the fact that this council has a right to view and make a decision on whether or not a solar farm comes to a location within the city limits. And as long as that happens, I think that we go away with, in my opinion, we go away with the right decision. When the body makes the decision, hopefully we make the right decision listening to the communities. And that's all I wanted to say about it. I know there's going to be changes because it's political. It's always political from Richmond to Norfolk to Suffolk. It's just political. But some of these solar farms that I have seen around, and I see some of them going down towards the Outer Banks and different places, they're atrocious. They're atrocious. They've never considered how they screen them in. They never consider the vegetation. And it's nothing really great to look at other than a bunch of solar panels. So it has some pros and cons. And we know that renewable energy is where we're trying to go. But we got to do it responsibly. And so therefore, that's what I would look at if I was sitting here on this council. And I will continue to look at that as long as I'm sitting here, as long as a conditional use permit comes forward for a solar farm to come here. So I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Councilperson Butler Barlow.
Kevin, thanks for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I also appreciate the diligent investigation that staff is doing to look at this situation, and just the fact that we're reviewing it and that we're considering different options. I really do appreciate that you all have obviously taken a lot of time and thought about a lot of this. A small thank you for calling them facilities and not farms. That's a pet peeve of mine. And I just wanted to make a comment and a suggestion. I noticed that you mentioned that the Ag Committee suggested looking at the roofs of warehouses, and I would like to submit that city-owned property and schools would also be an excellent place to consider, and that, add that to the thought process. I think we're seeing that in a lot of areas where, especially the public school systems, they're using it not only to offset energy costs, but also as training for science and technology. So just a comment. Again, thank you so much for your report, and thank you for your review of this. Appreciate it.
Councilman Goldberg.
Thank you, Mayor. What's the effect on the farmer who wants to do this? He's been offered and he wants to do that, this solar farm, and it's his land and his land use. What's the situation there on that?
So based upon our recommendation or the direction that we are today, is that if they were approached by a solar company and wanted to work out an arrangement, they could do so, and then an application would get filed, assuming they're in the ag district or M1 or M2, and so the process would not change. They would submit an application and they would seek a conditional use permit.
Councilman Johnson?
And Kevin, I'll be brief too, because obviously we needed to do exactly what we've done thus far, and I'm just prayerful that we'll move forward, recognizing what other communities are continuing to do, like Caroline County and these other places, because it is still so much we need to take a look at as far as the best use of solar and where solar needs to be and how it's going to affect the entire city. So our approach is great. I think we're right where we need to be, but I do hope staff will continue to recognize that we really haven't said anything yet. So hopefully down the road, we're going to stay open to the fact that there may be use for solar facilities, but where might they need to be at some point? And I kind of agree with the industrial facilities and city buildings and school buildings and new warehouses going forward, that maybe that's what we need to be looking at and putting out to the world, that this is where we'd like to see these facilities. So, but thank you. I think we're on the right road. I think this was a great start, and I'm hoping I know with you, we'll keep it in the forefront all the time. We'll keep watching what's going forward, but thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments? I'll just finish up with a couple of quick comments here. I agree with Councilman Fawcett that all solar facilities should probably require a conditional use permit. I'm a little disappointed, I'm a little more than disappointed that the Committee on Ordinances is recommended no changes. I think that staff needs more guidance, and so does this council, to more or less have us consider everything and anything, which is okay, but we're trying to do that really without any specific guidance. We're trying to put it all into one whole. So whether it's square, whatever, we're just dumping it all in together. In a little bit of research that I've done, as I've seen, a lot of the cities and localities, and you mentioned it, you kind of alluded to a few times, less than 3 megawatts, more than 3 megawatts, and then there's cities that have different requirements based into 3 different megawatt ratings, because depending on how big they are, normally, the larger they are, the more issues that you have to contend with versus the smaller ones, which may be able to just be plugged in rather than to worry about inverters, transformers, and all these other things that they got going on. I think that your decision, solar farms are rather unusual in that one may be appropriate on the same road and then not appropriate on the same road a mile down the road, depending on where it is, what it's adjacent to. I think it should also have some relevance in regards to what the current zoning is. I don't think we can look at a solar farm that's application for rezoning on an agricultural piece of property and someone coming forward to request a CUP for a solar facility on M zoning. I mean, let's look at what's allowed on M zoning now. You can do junkyards, you can do heavy equipment, and a lot of other things that are a lot more onerous than putting a solar panel on it. And we're kind of treating them all the same. They can be right next to a residential area or not near a residential area. All these need to be factors in the decision that's made, and it would be nice if we had these guidelines so staff could look at them and bring us a recommendation that we can kind of hang our hat on based on what they're adjacent to, what the current zoning is, what size they are, and based on the size, based on where they are, based on the current zoning, then this is our recommendation. Right now, we just chunk them all in a pot, and then we get stuck having to make a decision on it, which is rather hard. Obviously, when you look at what's been approved versus what's been denied, I mean, this body is capable of making the decision because it's almost been a 50-50 split. We've approved as many as we've turned down, and we've turned down as many as we've approved. But there's a whole lot of discussion. And so I would really like to see the Committee on Ordinances revisit this sooner than later, because they are going to continue to come, and they would put them in a position where they can do more of the legwork and come to us with a recommendation. So it's not just one size fits all. But I do appreciate your recommendation, your comment. Yeah.
I would add, our theme of the last few years is comprehensive plan. And so as part of the comprehensive plan, we're looking to get a little more teeth related to solar. It was kind of an afterthought or towards the end last comp plan, as it was just kind of infancy, this whole kind of idea. And so I would anticipate seeing a lot more direction or guidance in the comp plan that we could probably then turn into future ordinances.
And I think that's what we need. We just need some more guidance. So and not only do we need that guidance, but the applicants need that guidance, because they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants right now, not really knowing what we may approve and what we may not approve. And a lot of it is based on nothing more than citizen input, which is important. But we need to have some type of established guidelines depending on, like I said, size, locality, current zoning, et cetera. But I appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll continue to work on. Councilman Fawcett. Don't cut yourself off. Boom.
Just one question, Kevin. Since the last CUPs of solar farms that have come before us, is there anything of interest right now? Has anybody come forward? Is there any CIPs in the pipeline right now with regards to wanting to put solar farms or a solar farm or whatever you want to label it as? Do we have anything in the pipeline right now that is out there that we haven't seen yet? Do you know of?
We currently have no applications, but we've taken a few phone calls of interest.
So we've had a few interests, but no apps. Okay, thank you.
Okay, our last item is summer special events. Mr. Manager?
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. Teresa Earls, Tourism Development Manager, will provide the presentation. And as she steps there, we know we're getting ready to get some energy.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, Honorable Council, Mr. Manager, I would tell you that I have a brief presentation, but that would be a complete and utter lie. But it's not boring, I promise you. So just settle in. Summer in Suffolk. One of my favorite attractions happens to be located behind the Visitor Center. That is our Suffolk Farmers Market. We are now open every Saturday from 9 to 1. And now, starting today, we're doing bonus markets during the summer. So every Wednesday from 3:30 to 6:30, you'll have the opportunity to stop by the Visitor Center Pavilion and pick up some fresh produce or a gift for someone. It definitely is a smaller market than you would see traditionally on a Saturday, but we are there and hope that it will continue to grow. Again, it started today and it will continue through the end of August. And as with every season, we just keep growing and getting better and better, and our vendors have grown, and last year was our most successful market that we've had since we began 15, 16 years ago. But you can get a variety of fresh local produce and beef, poultry, eggs, honey, baked goods, pickled vegetables, handmade soaps, candles, decor, and so much more. If you'd like to keep up with the vendors that are there each week, and especially on Wednesdays, you can go to SuffolkVAFarmersMarket.com, and we update that regularly. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook and provide your input and share with your friends. Speaking of farmers markets, our friends at Bridgeport off of 17, they have brought their farmers market back for a second year. We've been very fortunate to partner with Bridgeport so that when they plan their farmers market, they specifically schedule it around the downtown market so that there's something to do for everyone on different days of the week. The farmers market at Bridgeport is operated 10 to 2 every second and fourth Sunday until September 25th. They too offer live entertainment, and you can find that schedule at bridgeportsuffolk.com/farmersmarket, but they also offer a variety of locally grown goods, and you can get the best cupcakes and everything in between. So definitely stop by. It's a destination into itself. Some other ongoing events, we have art exhibits. The Chesapeake Bay Art Association currently has their open member show on display at the Suffolk Center for Cultural Arts through June 24th. The Suffolk Art League, which is housed at the Suffolk Art Gallery on Bosley, their exhibit for the summer will be open member show, and that kicks off on June 14th and will stay on display for a month. And then the Suffolk Nansemond Historical Society, they have a current exhibit called The History of Education, featuring schools and educators spanning the years in Suffolk and Nansemond County. And that's currently on display through the end of July at the Phillips Dawson House. Of course, these are free and open to the public. Now, I know it's not technically summer, but it sure feels like it. But live music makes me think of a great summertime, and we have live music throughout the city. If anyone says there's nothing to do here, they're lying, I promise. At Bridgeport, they are starting their new events called CAY, Centered Around You. They're community nights where they'll have live music and food trucks, and of course it's free and open to the public. They're doing these events on the first Thursday in June, September, and October. I know that's not technically summer, but I wanted you to mark your calendar. Tomorrow night, they'll have Good Shot, Judy, and Saute Kitchen, and you can check that out at Bridgeport Office 17. And then many of our businesses or restaurants have live music regularly scheduled throughout the weeks, year-round. And some of these locations include the Nansemond Brewing Station, High Tide Restaurant and Raw Bar, Decoy Seafood, Fin and Tonic, Durrell's Restaurant and Pub, of course, the Bridgeport Farmers Market, and the Suffolk Farmers Market. And this is just a few. We definitely try to share as much information as we can as we find live music and concerts and different events coming up throughout the city. Now, of course, I'm going to brag a little bit on our tour program. Right now, we're offering 11 different tours. This includes nature walks and swamp safaris. We have several different cemetery strolls with, we have one that's dedicated to just Victorian Suffolk. It's called Dying to Be There. So if you're interested in Victorian symbolism, you can certainly take that tour. Our ghost walks remain popular year-round, and we will happily put together a custom tour for groups of 6 or more, and we have a regular schedule that people can just call and reserve their space at any time. It's a little hot in the swamp right now, but people are still going. So I just recommend bug spray, light clothing, and sunscreen. Our Suffolk Parks and Rec Department, they are hosting the annual senior prom for individuals 55 and older on June 10th from 10 to 1, which is the perfect time for prom. It's at the Curtis Military Recreation Center in Whaleyville, and you can go onto the Suffolk Parks and Rec's website to find out more information about that. And of course, everybody's favorite, the TGIF Summer Concert Series. As you know, we kick off at Constance Wharf Park for the first half of the season, and then we go to Bennett's Creek Park for the second half. We kick off on Friday, June 17th with Raw Jazz, and then everybody wants to know, we wrap up at Constance Wharf with the DeLoreans. And then the DeLoreans will be back when we go to Bennett's Creek at August 5th, and then we close out the whole season August 19th. These concerts are free and open to the public, family-friendly. The park's open at 6, and the concerts go until 9:30. There are food vendors on site for concession sales. We recommend you bring a chair or a blanket or however you'd like to enjoy the concert. The Suffolk Public Library is hosting Juneteenth Black Excellence Expo at the Morgan Memorial Library on June 18th from 10 to 2. And this is a chance to make your own story quilt, your own DIY African shaker. There will be discussion panels and vendors, and there will be something for all ages. It, of course, is free and open to the public, as are all the Suffolk Public Library activities. Some of the panels will include Dr. Grace Gibson speaking on Afrofuturism, Black Representation in Media by Janine Coveney, Jerron Duvall, and Lily Kunda, and readings by local authors Sylvia Bond, Queen Yakini, and Tanya Swindell, and more. And Suffolk Tourism is presenting a summer of adventure through a summer film series at the Suffolk Center for Cultural Arts. We are going to be showing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade on the big screen. And it's just in time for Father's Day. It's a great movie for father and son for Father's Day. It's $2 per person, and we will show Jurassic Park, the original movie, on July 17th. It's also at 2, and then we are going to finish out the summer with Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. You can purchase your tickets at the door, or you can buy them online at suffolkcenter.org. Back to the Suffolk Library, as you may know, June is Pride Month, and there's lots of Pride activities going on through the Suffolk Library for all ages. The library is celebrating LGBTQIA+ and the community and different Pride-themed events. Most notably, on June 24th from 5 to 8, it's an all-ages event. It's called Parking Lot Pride at the North Suffolk Library. There will be information tables and a variety of activities and open mics, and of course, everybody loves food. There's a variety of other Pride events coming up, whether you want to do Zoom or in person, whether it's adults only or family friendly, they offer something for everyone. Most notably, also, well, I should say that twice, but also Suffolk celebrates Pride with Q&A with local LGBTQIA+ authors and artists. That will be on June 22nd at the Suffolk Center for Cultural Arts. Also back for the 7th annual Amazing Peanut Chase, the library brings this really cool scavenger hunt throughout the city. So if you think you know everything about Suffolk, I'm sure they have found something you do not know. It's going to kick off at Morgan Memorial Library. You need to get there early to get your packet pickup at 1. And then the whole event goes from 1 to 4 on June 25th. You need to register in advance because most people do this in teams, and you're going to need your friends to help you. But it's a lot of fun, and every year it just gets bigger and better. We've brought back story time at the station. As you may know, Suffolk Tourism also operates the Seaboard Station Railroad Museum, and now that COVID restrictions have lessened, we're inviting children and their parents back to experience story time. So the next one is on Tuesday, June 28th. It's at 10:30, and it's free, and it's ideally for kids who are ages 3 to 5. And they'll come in and we will read them 2 transportation-themed books, and they will get to explore the museum, and then we give them a take-home activity and souvenir and sticker, and they come back, and they can come back every time we host it, and they'll get a different book. Knock on wood, we don't run out of train books. SuffolkTrainStation.com, that's where you'll find out which books and events that we have going on at the train station. July 4th, the Stars and Stripes Spectacular returns to Constance Wharf Park and Marina. Parks and Recreation produces this event. It opens at 5:30 p.m. The Fuzz Band will be performing from 6 to 9, and then the fireworks cap off the evening at 9 p.m. Of course, it's free and open to the public. Suffolk Sweets Week is back. This is our second year offering Suffolk Sweets Week. It's a kind of a takeoff of our restaurant week where we only celebrate all the good sweets and sugary treats. We say from simply sweet to deliciously decadent. This promotion highlights our best culinary temptations. So you don't need tickets, you don't need vouchers, you just go to a participating restaurant, whether it's a restaurant, a bakery, and you order off the Sweets Week menu, whatever their signature sweet is for the time, July 16th through the 23rd. Parks and Rec is also offering a couple of really cool movie options for families. Flick and Float at the Cypress Park Pool will be held on July 16th. The rain date is July 23rd. It's at 8 p.m., and they're going to allow folks to vote online on their Facebook page whether they want to see Encanto or Luca. I'm betting Encanto wins, but we'll see. That is a free and open to the public event, of course. And then at the Holland Ball Field Movie in the Park, they're going to show the classic Ladybugs with Rodney Dangerfield on August 27th at 8:15. The Nansman Indian Tribal Powwow is back on August 20th through 21st on Pembroke Lane. You can find out more details, because I know this flyer is very small, at nansman.org. But it's a 2-day Native American cultural celebration. It includes music, dance, food, and crafts. And of course, it's free and open to the public. We get into September with the Suffolk Plein Air Festival. Plein air is what most people, if they either know or they don't, people painting outside, whether they're painting landscapes or waterfront. And we have these wonderfully talented painters who painted all of these paintings that you see in Suffolk over the past couple of years. And we're having a 5-day festival that is led by the Suffolk Center for Cultural Arts and includes Suffolk Tourism and the Suffolk Art League as well, plus a variety of sponsors. And so you'll find outdoor painting at various locations throughout the city. There will be a wet paint sale and cocktail reception, a quick draw painting during the Taste of Suffolk, and an awards ceremony. You can find all the details at suffolkpleinair.org should you choose to paint or you just want to purchase a piece of art or attend one of the many events. well, I mentioned Taste of Suffolk, and I feel like we're probably stretching into fall, but has to be one of the most favorite events we have. Our Downtown Street Festival, September 10th, usually runs 11 to 5, and then we have an after party at the Courthouse Fountain Park. You'll have food, music, wine, and craft beer, merchants, and family fun. Music by Bobby Blackhat, Black and Gold, Ben Phelps Project, Rob Oliver, and On the Verge, already slated to play. So we're super excited to bring this kind of event back to downtown. Suffolk Tourism is hosting another family movie. We get people back into school, and we're going to give them a little break. For $1 per person, they can come to the Suffolk Center for Cultural Arts and see the movie Sing 2 at the Suffolk Center on the big screen, September 8th at 2 p.m. Visit SuffolkVA.com. You can find the complete city event calendar, and I told you it wasn't going to be short, but if you go there, you can find all of our attraction information or dining information. We just launched a brand new website, and so we're really excited to share it with everybody. Please use it accordingly. And you can always find us on social media at Visit Suffolk VA. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Earls. Whoever said there wasn't much going on in Suffolk just hadn't looked for it yet, but thank you for everything you do. We got a ton going on in our city. Councilman Goldberg, let me get your button there.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you find something else for us to do?
There's actually a lot more, but I can only put so much in the presentation.
Okay.
They cut me off at a certain point.
Well, the plein air is
Yes.
a wonderful event.
It is.
Last year, we had one of the young ladies, the artist, stay with us,
Okay.
and she's going to stay with us again. She's already called and has reserved a room in our home. She says she's bringing her dog with her and everything, and so that's okay.
So make sure you pay that occupancy tax.
She's a great artist, and she had a lot of fun, so we're looking forward to that. And I think that was a real success.
It was a success, and it adds another dimension to an already successful event with Taste of Suffolk. And it does bring artists and people who just love art back to Suffolk. And hopefully, year after year, it'll build. And like in similar cities, like counties, Bath County, they have a really large plein air festival, and it's served them very nicely as far as their local economy. So any chance we get to brag on Suffolk and bring people in, we'll take it.
Well, I congratulate you on your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Bennett.
Thank you, Ms. Earl. Great presentation. I'm glad to see that farmers market is opening up more days. That's great news. But I'm just concerned, I would like to see it down on the east end, some type of sort of food desert out there. And I know during the year, during the summer months and all, we have a lot of people from the country with a pickup truck would come and set up. And it's very busy. So a lot of those people on that end of town doesn't have transportation
Sure.
to be able to get to the farmer's market. And they definitely need some of those nice fresh vegetables and things. I would hope that we could find some place on the east end to set up one day a week or sometime that for a few hours that people will be able to get some of those types of things.
I agree. It has a great deal of potential, and it's something worth looking into to see if it's something that the city can manage and hopefully facilitate. So absolutely,
It's definitely a need there.
yes.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments? If not, Ms. Earls, thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
presentation. That concludes our open session part of our work session. I understand we do have a motion for a closed meeting. Madam Clerk, will you please read the motion for consideration?
Pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A, 8, and A1, consultation with legal counsel employed by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the legal advice of such counsel, and the discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for appointment and the assignment, appointment, and performance of specific public officers or appointees of the city, specifically the appointments as shown in the attached list for vacancies or term expirations for the Clean Community Commission, the Early Childhood Development Commission, the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, the Human Services Advisory Board, the Local Board of Building Code Appeals, the Paul D. Camp Community College Board, the Sister Cities Commission, the Tidewater Youth Service Commission, and the Western Tidewater Water Authority.
Council, motion's been presented for consideration. Councilman Fawcett.
Move to approve, Mayor.
A motion for approval from Councilman Fawcett. Councilman Goldberg.
Second, Mayor.
Second from Councilman Goldberg. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Council members, prepare to vote. Please vote. Madam Clerk, please record the vote.
The motion is approved by a vote of 8 to 0.
That concludes our work session. We will reconvene at 6 p.m.